The Tale of Nottingswood by J.R. Young. Narrated by the author. Prologue. This is a story unlike any other, about a humdumly sister and ho-humly brother who shared a small house throughout every season and lived out their lives of strict rule and reason. There was no heart, for there was no love, no visions of hell or heaven above, and childhood dreams carried on through the years could not be remembered in spite of their fears that all was not well in Nottingswood, where no man stands, where no man should. Until one day. The Tale of Nottingswood, Part 1. A cry was heard throughout the town where old men fight the up and down of aged bones, the cankerous sort, who drown their pain in pints of port. The cry wasn't sharp, but shrill to the ear. 'Twas not the least pleasant for mankind to hear, but it caught the attention of the brother and sister, that they set about town to find and to dister the thing that was crying so loud and so shrill. Then they spotted the source at the top of the hill. At the top of the hill at the center of town, right there on Main Street, the sun would shine down all for 2 hours only, and that was at best, while the town stayed inside at the judge's behest. "Stay out of the light!" Now that was her order, and brother and sister had never ignored her. But when the clock struck midday, this wailing did sound, and this tale is about the thing that they found. And what did they find? Just a worn leather basket containing what seemed like a young baby's casket, but it wasn't a casket, just a box after all. Still, there was something amiss about this object so small, though not small at all, for its size was deceiving, and the creature inside was still happily breathing. Yet breathing, I fear, is not the right word for a cry so loud it was outright absurd. The brother and sister looked on it quite curious. It wasn't upset or bewildered or furious, just simply awash in a fit of conniption, and around its neck there hung an inscription. The brother bent down to read it aloud, his voice barely heard by the gathering crowd. "Now what does it say?" sister cried. "Please do tell." But her attention averted when her nose caught the smell of a gathering stench, but she cried just the same. "Brother, I beg you, please tell us its name." The brother stared dumbly, his brow quite perplexed as he pondered the plate that carried the text. "It's no name at all, but simply instruction. Change me, I'm soiled." A simple injunction. What unusual timing, and how could this be? The inscription was read at 10:15 when all were ensconced in their own occupation, no time for each other or chance jubilation. 10:15, this is highly unlikely. To be away from our work, the judge won't take this lightly. We should be to our thinking, not wandering about. The crying must stop. We must figure this out. But what did they know of babies and changing? For all that they knew, someone was just rearranging their home for the evening, and who would have guessed that they threw out their baby along with this chest, though it wasn't a chest, just a small baby casket, and just the right size to fit in the basket that brother and sister found atop of the hill, and the siren it made had them all standing still. The creature looked small, much smaller than normal. From its toe to its top it was nothing quite formal. Twists of fine hair coiffed its head like a crown, its locks weaving over a brilliant white gown. But the cry was as loud and as clear as the day. "Oh, won't you be quiet? Won't you please go away?" So, on with his glove, brother reached out his hand to attend to this creature from a near distant land. With the napkin removed, the creature abated the ear-piercing cry that everyone hated, that took them away from their rules and their reason, and rudely disturbed a calm, quiet season. But what to do now, the pair sat at wonder. It was all left up to this sister and brother, for no one would touch it. This thing in a basket. Where's it belong? "Well, why don't you ask it?" The voice was a voice from a man in the crowd, who said it quite abruptly and said it quite loud. "Listen, you two, return to your post. You both have the job we all value the most." You see, this pair of twins from sun-up to sundown guarded the thoroughfare that led out of town to places unknown outside of the wall that surrounded the town and was 100 feet tall. Some 12 years ago the judge ordered it built. With wrought stone and sweat it was built to the hilt, and never a foot has ventured outside. They deemed it too risky, found it safer to hide.
"But hide from what? Are there giants or creatures with sharp, angry claws and unworldly features?
Or fires and swamps with ook, gook, and slime?
Now just hold your horses and let me finish my rhyme. Right. The last thing that was said to this ho-humly pair was,
"Just let it die. Just leave it there."
The two could not believe it. Was their reason so cold? The thing looked no more than 3 Notting days old. The crowd soon dispersed. They each ran away back to their homes, where they spend most the day with their heads in their books and their ears on patrol, to make sure that Nottingswood stays under control. At the top of the hill, this sister and brother stared down at the basket, and then to each other. "We can't wait all day, sis, away from our post, the one job in town that is valued the most. It must have a mommy or daddy, you think. Hurry now, brother, for it makes one more stink." So off they both went to each door for a clue, asking each neighbor, "This belong to you?" Then door after door was slammed in their faces. The orphanage turned them down of all places. "What's going on? This is rather absurd. You'd taken a puppy, a kitten, or bird, so why not this tiny strange thing in a basket? Have you lost all your reason? Dare we not even ask it?" It defied all logic just to leave it alone, and since no one responded, they took the thing home. At home, on the floor, they stared at it sleeping, closed all the curtains to keep out the peeping of Nottingswood spies sent out by the voices that influenced the judge in all of her choices. They checked the blockade. It was just as secure. Then set the alarm, but just to be sure, brother placed one more lock on the great Notting's gate, then went back inside as it was already late. They retired that night and laid back in their beds, but suddenly, for once, they were not in their heads. A heavy sensation that was curiously light bothered them so that it kept them all night engaged in how this curious throbbing did start in the very same place where there once lived a heart. It wasn't biological or logical at all. In fact, there was no answer in any book at all. It fit no disease that carried a name, though they didn't feel sick. Was this some sort of game, a puzzle of sorts? No, that's out of the question. Perhaps just a bubble traveling through their digestion. 'Twas a tingling of a feeling never once felt before, and the more that they felt it, they wanted it more. As the sun rose, an alarm began sounding. "Something broke through the gate!" Their adrenaline pounding. But the gate was intact, and the alarm still set. Startled and foggy, how could they forget that the alarm that they heard was simply the wailing of the very same cry they once tried curtailing? The blood back to their brains brought them back to their senses. It was time to think quickly, and not of pretenses. So they built a small dome out of cushions and pillows in their efforts to quell the gathering billows of sound crying forth from this something so small. What to do now? Is there no hope at all? Then a flash of reminder jumped into his head. The brother remembered the inscription that read, "Change me, I'm soiled." Well, that must be it. All we must do is change it to it. But the napkin was dry and didn't stink as before, and the sound that it made was too hard to ignore. Then the sister remembered its last fit of conniption. "Dear brother, look down and read the inscription." "Sis, don't be silly. I know what it reads. We just need to think what this creature now needs. It doesn't need changing as the plaque read before." "Oh, stop being dense and read it once more." With his head through the cushions, he reached for the plaque, but the inscription this time had him taken aback. "That's just not possible. How could this be? It's not even 9 or 2:15 when all this began less than 1 day ago." "Brother, tell me what happened. I simply must know." His head back through the cushions, he read it again. Not believing his eyes, he pulled out a pen and etched the inscription onto a small scroll to show anxious sister their next lofty goal. Brother crawled out and sat on the floor, his eyebrows now frowning at this untimely chore. "It just is not possible. How could this be?" "Well, what does it say?" "I'm hungry. Feed me." But what does it eat? They hadn't a clue. They tried everything from Notting's brew stew to turnips and bland cakes and flat-flavored slurry. "Nothing is working," Sis said. "Please do hurry." Then the taste from a memory she had as a child fell into her mind, of a fruit that grew wild that their mother would pick and bring home for them all when they were just children, right before the Great Wall. before the Great Wall, when all was in colour, when everyone laughed and enjoyed one another, and the simplest of pleasures were thought a delight, for the order of voices, before day turned to night. Brother, I have it. I know what it needs. It grows in a meadow through hazelbrush weeds. She strained to see clearly the memory she had, dusting through visions, the good and the sad. She closed her eyes tight. I can see it, almost. And then it appeared. It's down by the coast. Brother's face turned pale as a ghost. This fruit, you say, is down by the coast? Yes, down by the coast. It's so clear in my mind, the very location which is right where we'll find the sweet lily fruit Mom fed both of us when we were just babies whenever we'd fuss. Don't you remember? I do, sis, but wait. Sweet lily fruit grows outside of our gate. Caught up in a memory she thought she'd forgotten, she'd ne'er considered circumstances so rotten that kept them from tasting the fruit from outside that once they enjoyed at their dear mother's side. A lump in her throat. Her eyes started to swell. What's happening to me? I don't feel so well. In my chest there's an aching. In my gullet a hook. It's sadness you feel. That's what it says in our books. I know our food's bland, and this is not to unnerve, but the judge clearly states that it's what we deserve. Deserve, yes, indeed, for what I don't know, but I'm sure something wrong that we did long ago. What does that matter? This baby's still crying. We must feed it this fruit to keep it from dying. Well, maybe dying is what it must do if we're to get back to normal, especially you. The howling and wailing is not good for us. It's creating a stir and causing a fuss. It's asking too much to step out of bounds in the dead of the day with spies making their rounds. Is this all really worth it? What if we fail? The moment we're caught, we'll both go to jail, or worse even yet, outright execution. Getting rid of this thing is our only solution. Sis thought for a moment while biting her lip. This was surely the largest of puzzles to trip through her mind, so confused and at war with her chest that she couldn't let go or give it to rest. I hear what you're saying, dear brother, I do. But this feeling inside that I know you feel too tells me this thing, just like us, has a right to live out its life, even though that it might put all that we know on top of its head. And to let this thing die? I'd rather die instead. Brother was silent, his eyes facing his feet, a pulsing inside where his rib cages meet. Brother, please hear me and trust me somehow, 'cause I just can't explain what I'm feeling right now. Sis, I believe you. Your reason makes sense, while the thought of escaping is making me tense. If anyone sees or sounds an alarm, just then brother's sister grabbed his left arm. What about Mother's cloak that she left when she died? You can dust it clean off, then take it outside, and I'll create a distraction to divert the eyes of any nefarious and wandering spies while you unlock the gate and slip past the wall. But who'd notice, really? We're its keepers, after all. Well, that can't work. I need your memory to guide my way to the fruit once I make it outside. Then I'll go instead. No, it's not safe for you. In the unknown there is danger. You might not make it through. Brother, that's kind of you to think of me so, but there's no time to plan and both cannot go. We have to act now, so what will it be? You go on ahead. I'll wait under the lee of the tree that faces North Notting's way. Now please do be careful. I'll be okay. Then, with a look of both fear and excitement, she threw on the cloak despite the indictment that would surely result from her mutinous escape to the world of uncertainty outside Nottingswood's gate. One by one, brother unlatched every lock, looking over his shoulder and then at the clock. Now stick to the path and go straight to the sea where you say this sweet lily grows untamed and free. And hurry back quick while this creature's still crying. And here's hoping you're right, and we can keep it from dying. Sis slipped out the gate. Brother shut it back tight. Even though it was wrong, it somehow felt right. He grabbed some old books he hadn't looked at in ages, sat by the tree and sorted through pages of history and legends about Nottingswood past. Then he found the forgotten. An answer at last? In a history book there, among one of the choices, slick, thick, and published by the order of voices, told brother all he thought he needed to know of the who's, what's, and whys of their town long ago. He read and he read for what seemed like forever, and he knew he should have listened to every shouldn't know and never. Brother's head popped up quick. He closed up the book. A monster's out there! So he got up to look through the crack in the gate that led to outside. "If that beast has escaped, she'll be eaten alive." No sooner had that awful thought crossed his mind, knocked an odd patterned knock that they had previously assigned. As inconspicuous as he could, Brother unlocked the gate and, escorting her home, asked, "Why were you late?" With Mother's cloak in a bundle, Sister's eyes opened wide. "I'll tell you, dear brother, once we both are inside." Lolloping into the house, Sister tossed on the bed the small berry fruit colored deep ruby red, with spots of bright yellow which speckled its surface. For a moment the sight had them forgetting their purpose. But soon, through the dome of pillows surrounding the creature, whose mouth was still open sounding, the cry of all cries reverberating within, Brother closed up his ears and tossed a lily fruit in. Into its mouth on the very first try, Brother waited to hear one more ear-cringing cry, but not one sound came, only smacking and chewing from this wee creature's mouth that could be their undoing. He fed it 3 more, then it soon fell asleep, and he studied the thing from its head to its feet. It looked like their species, but not of their race, while a glow of sweet innocence enveloped its face. Each characteristic was perfect, not a feature was flawed. A star from the heavens, a stray demigod. A beat in his bosom made him reach out his hand to cradle the thing he did not understand. It made not a sound as he reached in the basket, pulled it out from the box that they once called its casket. It was still, slowly breathing, lying there in his palm. But what was this power that made him feel calm and collected when so much was out of sorts, and this morning alone had him changing his shorts? He cast aside the box that was withered and wizened, which served for too long as this poor creature's prison. Into the basket he placed a pillow from the stack. About to lay the thing down, he felt something on its back. 2 lumps were protruding down and in from its shoulders, no bigger than beans, but much harder than boulders. Finally, laying it down, he kept it warm with his socks, and as he got up to leave, he crushed the small box. Outside of the pillows, his sister stood proud. He pulled her aside so they could both speak out loud, her face of excitement and wonderment gleaming so bright that he couldn't help asking its meaning. "Oh, brother, can you even hardly imagine what exists in the land outside of our cabin, outside of our clock, and our town and our wall? Have you the faintest idea what is out there at all? There are pathways through fields of greens, blues, and purples, cute hopping bunny goats, fuzzywigs, and snurples, dark jungles of trees climbing into the sky, as sounds fill your ears when whipplers fly by." Brother interrupted, not hearing the rest. He must tell her their history and hope for the best. "Sister, I was glad to see you arrive, for there is something out there that could eat you alive. It's the reason we hide behind the Great Wall, the something that once could have finished us all." So he showed her the book and the story he read, with each frightening image still lodged in his head. A windy, dark day left one dark, windy night, some 12 years prior to this daring pair's plight. A day that was filled with hubbub and commotion, that rocked the whole town regarding the notion of undoing the reign of the great winged spectre who perched Old Town Square and was once its protector. Illustrations showed the twins a great beast with teeth, dragon-like wings, and a torso underneath of vein rippled flesh, all muscle, no hair, a tattered robe whipping as it flew through the air. It was built like a person, just 5 people-feet taller, and nothing around it could make it look smaller. It sneered and it snarled, eating all who would pass, driving townsfolk to scatter, creating quite the morass. Then in came the voices to bring order and might, to put down this old beast and set things aright. They wrapped it in chains, then pulled out a plaque to hang round its neck so it could talk back. "Will you protect us?" asked the town's new lawmen. The plaque then read clearly, "No, not ever again." And so there it was, the beast dragged to town square, locked down to be stoned by the townspeople there. It howled and it hissed as it was pelted with rocks, while the carpenters constructed a creature-sized box. It bowed to the blows, wrapped itself in its wings as it fell to the ground. The voices knew underlings, heave-hefted, heave-hoed, hoisting it high in the air, then down into the box with uproarious fanfare. Out stepped the judge, her voice stern and austere. "This is all our fault," said so each one could hear. "We allowed this to happen. We let this beast in our midst. We thought we could control it." Then she threw down her fist. "We're not ones to adventure, to explore regions unknown, dig deeper, run farther, fly where no one has flown. Now this is what happens when your mind wanders free. These wise outside voices will tell you who you must be." The cheering crowd let out a sigh of relief, as fear opened them up to this newfound belief. They gave all respect to the new order of voices, who protected them now from all of their choices. "There is safety within our strict rule and reason. You are what we say, or you'll be tried for treason." All shouted for joy. "True protection at last, as long as we stay in this order of caste." And for added protection, the big and the small worked all day and all night to build the Great Wall. The box with the creature was left at town center, serving to curtail even the slightest adventure to argue against what the voices might say by the mouth of the judge, who let them all stay. "The creature's dead. No, I just heard it whimper." Dead or alive, it remained all through that winter. The Great Wall now finished. The crowd gathered about to witness the box with the beast be cast out. Sealed tight at its edges, it was carried away through fields of sweet lilies and thrown into the bay. "Sis, you were there, and you could have been eaten, and those sweet lily fruits would serve only to sweeten the morsel you'd make as he'd swallow you whole. Brother, be quiet, and get me a bowl for the fruit I brought back. Then I'll tell all I saw when I ventured outside and broke Nottingswood law." They sat at the table, and she told him her fate as she took her first step beyond Nottingswood gate. "I told you of bunny goats, fuzzy wigs and snurples, and pathways through fields of green, blues, and purples. But there's more to it all, more than we've ever seen. Why our books have ignored it is rather obscene." She talked of the grass, how it tickled her toes, and the wafts of new smells that entered her nose. The air, too, felt different as it brushed past her face, and wearing the cloak, she could feel the embrace of a mother she hardly remembered at all, a mother who vanished 2 years after the wall. She saw the dark forest that loomed in the distance with screeches and howls, yet she held her persistence, for the beauty outside, more than her eyes could carry, outweighed the threatenings of anything scary. They sat and they talked for nearly 3 hours. Then she got to the part where the sweet lily flowers appeared on the horizon, where the bay meets the shore, a vision much greater than her memory could store. "I took off the cloak and picked all it would hold. It mattered not once that my arms were now cold. Neither saw I a monster fitting the old book's description. I cared only for stopping one last fit of conniption." So, with flutter flies and bumble bugs wanting to race, Sister, back on the path, held a quick, steady pace. With each step ahead, the town slowly arose. She could no longer notice the smells in her nose, nor the grass, nor the air, nor the life all around, as the north wall of Nottingswood towered high above the ground. It was colourless and silent, the contrast quite striking. It even made the forests outside seem less frightening. She'd never thought how her town looked from outside, lifeless and old like a kingdom had died. Cold and depressing was this image projecting. And from what, pray tell, was this great wall protecting us day out and day in and day out? The more that she thought, the less she figured out. "So there was no monster?" Brother asked, quite perplexed, for this was a question not normally vexed. "No sign of it at all," she said with a grin, causing Brother to sit back and take the grin in. "What's that on your face? What's wrong with your mouth? Each corner of your lips no longer points south." Sis noticed it too and thought for a while, until she determined, "I guess it's a smile." This new revelation made her smile even more, and a laugh from her belly that never happened before came tumbling out from somewhere once forgotten. Then both of them smelled a smell smelling rotten. Getting up from the table, being led to the bed by the smell emanating from what was once ruby red, was now turning gray like the rest of their town. "Oh dear," Sister slumped, her grin upside down. You see, the walls were too high to let in the sun that Lilyfruit needed to undo the undone. Oh, my dear brother, do you know what this means? I must return to the land of dark forests, ravines. But sis, it now means we're both in cahoots to change the unchangeable, to uproot our roots, to venture outside of our daily routine. This was not our intention. This was never foreseen. He looked back at the creature. Is this even worth it? How can we help it if we don't know who birthed it? It's not worth the risk just to keep it alive. I shall open the gate. Then you shall cast it outside. So that's what you think? Sister asked, quite a fuss. To get back to our normal is what's best for us? But I warn you, when she dies, as you're so apt to let it, your conscience, my brother, will never let you forget it. He knew she was right. He knew all along. Fear had altered his judgment to justify wrong. I'm sorry, dear sister. Now, here's what we do if we're to care for this creature and please Nottingswood too. We'll each take a turn sneaking out of the gate 3 times a day to put food on the plate and keep this thing happy and quiet at best, one day at a time until its next big request. So, on with the cloak they went day by day, each taking their turn, each making their way through huzzlebrush and fizzleweeds, great hills of flowers, past woodlands, ravines, through thunderous rain showers. A scratch of a thorn, or a trip and a fall, the sting of a snark was nothing at all, as each mishap did heal, with a new lesson learned, for Lilyfruit was not given, but rightfully earned. The creature, it grew, and it grew rather quickly. After days, weeks, and months, it was never once sickly, never once asked for more than what it was given, except for perhaps a bigger basket to live in. Even though it had legs, it still didn't walk. It ate and it slept, never once tried to talk. And the 2 curious bumps on its back grew as well. What on earth were they for? They just couldn't tell. One day, at the gate through which Sister did slip from her 233rd trip, they were met by their neighbors on the way to their house. Well, how do you do? Sneered the weaselly Miss Grouse. This was very unusual for Miss Grouse to be out. She was tall, crooked, and skinny, and her husband quite stout. The workday was not over. They should still be inside. Oh, look, it's the cloak I gave your mum before she died. Yes, ma'am, it is. Now may I ask why you're here? Oh, just thought I'd pop in and see you, my dear. This is highly unusual, beyond unexpected. Sis hid up the fruit as to not be detected by the gargantuan beak Miss Grouse called a nose that could sniff out a flea on the stem of a rose. Then spoke Mr. Grouse, little less than amused by his busybody wife, who was little more than enthused. We are not in our house, for we have no employment. Miss Grouse could not help but reveal her enjoyment. Her true skills were wasted held up in a coop, for she'd earned a reputation as the Nottingswood snoop. With a squint in her eye and a tilt of her head, Well, the cloak fits you well. It's too bad that she's dead. Sis started to pounce as heat flushed her face when Brother stepped in to ease the airspace between one who was nosy and the other hot-tempered, hopeful that some sort of truce could be rendered. So what is your employment? Brother asked, interrupting. Oh, said the man, his nerves now corrupting the tone of his voice as his eyes looked away. Will you look at the time? Have a nice day. Mr. Grouse grabbed the arm of his lady, still squinting at the brother and sister, and giving in to the hinting of her stout, stumpy spouse, she turned round with a huff. Then she reached her right hand into her blouse's left cuff and pulled out a book, then a quill from her hair, and began to write down all that they had seen there. Did you see what I saw? I don't know, dear, he said, her eyes now more shifty, her nose turning red. Their faces had color and their hair not as flat, a gleam in their eyes. What do you make of that? Both were old enough to remember, not too old to forget life before the Great War. But there was no regret in Miss Grouse as she wrote the changes she saw in the brother and sister who were breaking the law. How their color betrays them, this they cannot deny. Then she closed up the book of a new Nottingswood spy. Sister rushed in the house, brother not far behind. Do you think that she saw me? Do you think that she'll find out all we've been doing since we started escaping? I don't know, brother said, his knuckles now scraping the scruff of his chin. I think all is all right. but we must make a new plan and start leaving at night." So, when the sun fell low and the moon rose high, Sister tucked in the creature, then kissed it goodbye as she threw on the cloak to head toward the gate. Brother watched her routine, then stopped her. "Please wait." "What is it?" Sister asked, tying the belt round her waist. "What did you do to that thing in your haste when you were ready to leave? You puckered your lips, pressed them straight to its head, then your walk turned to skips." She thought for a moment. Then suddenly, "Oh my, I don't rightly know, but I was feeling quite high that it just came out natural like she was my child. And the swelling within?" Her eyes teared as she smiled. "Is it love?" Brother wondered. "'Cause it's shown with a kiss, and it's nurtured by caring that grows into bliss. It's why memories of Mum live with warmth and affection. But you must hide these feelings to avoid our detection." Sis knew about love, but it was not a sensation encouraged at all by the voice's oration. "Why are my eyes leaking?" she asked with concern. Brother pulled out a book and tried to discern what all of this meant. "It says here you're crying. Its causes are sadness, like when someone is dying." "But I don't feel sad. I feel quite alive. I don't understand why we both must connive to keep secret the beauty outside the Great Wall. Maybe that's why I'm sad. I'm just sad for us all." Sis wiped her eyes dry, tried to swallow her smile as she looked back once more at the creature docile in its basket of leather, much larger than before. And then, in an instant, Sis ducked out the door. Now, one thing they discovered that was more than unusual was something quite unique as well as quite useful. Mother's cloak, worn at night, was true camouflage from a distance, diffusing any onlooker's pause. Its surface reflection caused disorienting confusion, and with the hood up it was the perfect illusion. But not for Miss Grouse spying out through the shrubbery, squatting down on her haunches that were gangly and rubbery. See, she made the cloak, and for one purpose only, to uncover the mother of these children so homely for her untowardly rebellion of the Voice's new order a decade ago. Miss Grouse simply abhorred her. Grouse gave her the cloak in a feigned act of kindness, promising stealth and momentary blindness of anyone out trying to catch her at night, as she gathered more dissenters who believed she was right. The spyglass, constructed by the noble Sir Grouse in the underlying underbelly of the old Grouse's house, was a glass made to reveal this cloak of deception, a cloak made to betray a mother's stark insurrection. Now 10 years and 1 day have since passed away. Miss Grouse whispered wickedly,
"Oh, I really must say it's delicious, dear, isn't it? I cannot hardly wait to see this mother's children meet the very same fate."
Through the glass, Grouse saw Brother unlock the gate fast. Then Sister snuck out.
"Ha! We have them at last."
The old Miss Grouse snorted happily and shouted. Mr. Grouse hushed her quick for fear of being outed. She then pulled out the talk box and flipped a few switches, tapped it 2 times, resolving any last glitches. When the static came through, she called out to the others who abandoned their posts and left behind all their druthers. They hopped in their biros and rode on their Zenas. The officers in town drove in 2 giant steamers that hadn't been used for some time since the wall, when they hauled off dissenters to the great judgment hall. They parked out of sight where Brother could not see from his place in the grass sitting under the lee. The clock tower tick-tocked while everyone waited in hiding, as Miss Grouse had before plainly stated to everyone that day when she gave her debriefing, and tolerated not even 1 ounce of good griefing. Minutes to hours on the Nottingswood clock, as the Grouses awaited the one secret knock to signal the return of the sister who left the gate that was almost too heavy to heft. Then from out of the quiet came a tip-tippity-tap-tap, which woke up the mister who had started to nap. Miss Grouse raised the glass to look for the cloak, which would be the moment her alarm would provoke the spies and the sheriffs and the officers in town to surround them like flies and bring these 2 siblings down. Brother stood up, made his way to the locks while Miss Grouse could hardly keep from jumping out of her socks. Latch after latch till each latch was undone. Then, through the spyglass,
"There she is! Ha! We've won!" "You idiot, that's the signal," Miss Grouse said to her mister. "Brother has opened the gate, and I can now see the sister."
Mr. Grouse bumbled up and wound up the alarm. Then from every direction came a gathering swarm of spies and of sheriffs and of officers in town who were ready to bring these two poor siblings down. Peering back through her glass, standing up in the shrubbery, standing up from her haunches still gangly and rubbery.
No, move, get down. You're blocking my view. We can't lose the girl and turn our luck to snafu.
But nobody heard her above the commotion. So, with her glass to her eye, she walked toward the motion of spotlights and arms waving high in the air, and when she finally pushed through, found Brother standing there.
Where is she?
Grouse searched in every direction through her glass that could spot the one cloak of protection and sister who had just entered seconds ago. "I'm sorry, Miss Grouse," Brother said. "I don't know."
Don't play me the fool. I saw what you did. Now she's using the cloak to keep herself hid. Not to mention the fact every lock here's undone. You've been caught, boy, red-handed. Now confess what you've done.
"You're right. I've been caught. That I'll promptly admit. But it was me that escaped. Sis knew not one bit of what I was up to when I ventured outside."
That's rubbish. I saw her. You've blatantly lied.
"That's enough. Quiet down," mumbled Sergeant McFleary, whose demeanor was worn, not the slightest bit cheery. "We've all witnessed the boy, not the girl you profess traipsing around in some magical dress. Now, in with you, lad. To the back of the steamer. We'll let the judge decide the fate of you, dreamer." Sis watched from the window, safe from inside. But how long could she stay? And how long could she hide from that nosy nose noble, that nasty Miss Grouse, who was making her way to the sister's own house? Unconscionable! What nerve! Does this shrew really think she can just enter my house without raising a stink? Oh, but no time for questions, no time for my pride. I must take our dear creature and find somewhere to hide.